Hello and welcome to video 7 where we're going to start by looking at the basics of pivot tables. There'll be 2 episodes on pivot tables, a basics and an advanced, because they are extremely useful for data analysis in Excel for healthcare. We're going to start with the basics, just what it is and how to create it. So we'll come over here to the first pivot table basics tab. And this is where I've got instructions and the table that you're going to use. In the next tab, Pivot Table Basics 2 is where you can put your pivot table. Later we'll do a couple of pivot charts. So what is it? The pivot table just allows you to summarize and analyze, also organize large data sets dynamically. So the ability to quickly switch between questions, like what is this total build or sum or average build by this dimension versus this dimension, and quickly jump between those types of questions. That's the primary thing that it allows you to do. Steps to create it are pretty straightforward. We select the data, choose insert from the ribbon above, and then pivot table, and choose where it goes. So we'll take a look at doing that. And then for this first section, I want you to go ahead and experiment with adding different elements to the pivot table options, like different dimensions to slice the information over in the rows, and maybe different things we might measure in the values area. Alright, so I'm going to start by just clicking onto our table. Hint, another advantage of having it as a table is that I just have to go to insert. I don't need to select the whole range. It knows what I'm doing because I'm clicked onto a table. So insert from the ribbon and then pivot table. It's going to pop up a dialog box that says what is the table or range that you want to use for this, and it's got this encounter pivot table, which is what I had named it, and it's going to ask you where you want it to go. You can choose a brand new worksheet or put it into an existing worksheet, which is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to come over here to this pivot table basics 2, and then I'm going to say yes. Okay, let's start our pivoting. Alright, now we've got nothing here because we haven't made any choices. The way that these pivot tables work is that you can add filters, columns. If you're not tracking, my mouse is over here. Filters, columns, rows, and values. You're going to see how each one of these operates because we're going to use them and look at them. Your task on this first item is to explore. Try a bunch of these, watch what I do here. And so I'm going to start by taking something like blood type. I've clicked it and it's made an automatic choice for me to put it in the rows, but I could also click and drag that to the area where I want it. So I may put it, let's say, in the filters and say, I only want to see patients with an A positive blood type. Then I want to see information by the medical condition, and then I have to choose something that I want to see about that. So I might be heading to something like our build amount in order to see what is the total build amount by those medical conditions for our patients with a blood type of A positive. So we've actually just asked a somewhat complex query of this data. If it was in a table in a database, there would be a longer process of writing a query in order to return this sort of simple result that is visual, able to see, and answers a question. The other great thing is that it's still flexible. We can quickly change that approach and say, you know, I don't actually need to know this information by medical condition. I would rather see it by the doctor that they saw. Or I'd like to see it split by gender. Or I'd like to see it maybe by, let's say, age. Actually, it went ahead and put the age in the values area, so I'm going to have to change that and put it over in the rows. And you may say, well, that's a strange way to look at this. Why would we be looking... Oh, sorry, I mixed those up. I want age in the rows and build amount over here as the value. Why would we look at the build amount by each individual age? Well, there's a quick option here. If I right-click and choose Group, I can group that age into bins. So from 19 to 85 by, let's say, every 10 years. And so now I've got, what is the sum build amount for 19 to 28-year-olds, 29 to 38, that sort of a thing. So very flexible format in order to ask a whole lot of questions of the data and to stay where I can choose a whole a bunch of different ways to look at that. Now I haven't shown you an example where we would look at this across columns, so here would be one of those. I'll bring medical condition over to the columns, and so now we've still got all patients with an A positive blood type, and we're looking at female asthma patients, female cancer patients. So this gives us now 2 dimensions, and we see the difference in sum of billed amount across the cancer medical condition for men and women. Very interesting and helpful way to split and evaluate the data in a big table. Now, this isn't a gigantic table. It looks like it's 300 records, but this can handle data that's far, far bigger. You know, this could be a couple thousand records, and we can quickly get to this sort of summary information that could immediately help inform some problem solving that we're doing. So that's the basics I wanted you to do for this first couple of tasks. Create that pivot table, add some fields to the pivot table, and explore some of the other elements. We're going to keep moving through concepts in pivot tables, talk about how do we analyze data. You've already seen a few basics, and I've got a couple of ideas that I want you to go ahead and try, and I'll walk through them here so you can see how I would do them. So let's start by doing something like summarize total billed amount by admission type. You can imagine from what I've already shown you how we will do that. I'm going to get rid of those things I was just playing with, like filters. I will keep the sum of billed amount because that is the figure we're trying to get to. But as I've asked, we will do it by the admission type. And so I'm going to find admission type in my columns, which is here. But let's say we had a really long list of columns and or we just didn't see what we were looking for. You can also search. So as I start to type admission, it crops up as one of the top options. All right, so that's the first task. Can you get to the sum of billed amount by the admission type of the patient? And here we go. We've got a simple readable table with that result. All right, let's look at the next one that I ask. I say, let's go ahead and change from sum of billed amount to the average of billed amount. So we'll keep looking at this by the way that the patients got here or their admission type, but I need to look at it as an average. Now, the value we're looking at is based on billed amount, but it is summing that. The way that you can change what aggregate it is doing instead of summing is here in this value field settings option when I choose the caret that is right next to the field in values. So I'm going to choose value field settings, and immediately you can see my choice. It's right here under sum. You can count that, take the max, take the min, get the product, all sorts of different aggregations you can do of this, but that first simple one that may come up is I want to see the average. And so now we see the average of the billed amount based on the patient's admission type. All right, that's kind of number 2 we give you as a go and try it. Number 3 I've got is let's analyze these admissions by month. So we are going to go ahead and see how do dates work with pivot tables. So we're going to keep we're actually going to switch and do a different value because instead of looking at sum of billed, I want to see how many just patients actually came, and then we're going to choose that over the month, and we're going to look at how we do that. So let's get rid of that average of billed amount, get rid of admission type. I'm going to show you the primary way that I go ahead and count the number of records in a table is just by picking a column that is somewhat unique. If I know for sure it's unique, that's great, but this isn't a distinct count. It's just a full count of how many records are here. So for the most part, any column will work. I like to pick something like, in this table, the name, which is unique to the patients, to each patient, and go ahead and count how many times, how many from that names column. There's 299. So that's the number of admissions. But the ask is, let's look at the number of admissions by month. So we got to look for a date. And sure enough, right here we've got date of admission. If I click and choose that, it has made sort of an automatic decision for me that isn't exactly what I was looking for. It went ahead and took that date of admission and split it into year, quarter, month, and actual date. So you see in our table, it's summarizing it by year, but I can click into that year to see what was it by each quarter, or what was it by month within that quarter, or what was it by actual date in that month. So that is the automatic choice that it made that, to be quite honest, I really don't like. So we're going to right click on this date column here, and we're going to go to group. Here it's going to give us the groupings and how we'd like to do this. I'd like to do this by the month and year. So now you can see we've got January, or 2019 from January to December, what were the admissions, 2018, 2020, 2021, so on and so forth. So that's how you make some of the choices around dates. Another way I could have done that same thing is by just getting rid of some of the layers that are here in the rows, like get rid of quarter, get rid of the date of the admission, keep the months and years, but then I need to expand this. I do it by right clicking and choosing to expand, not ungroup, that's not the right one, I'm sorry. Maybe it's in this other item. Expand or collapse. I'm sorry, my eyes were just skimming over it. It's the expand or collapse option, and you can expand this particular one you had clicked on, collapse that one you clicked on, or expand the entire field. And so, what details do I want to show? That's not what I was going for, is it? Sorry. Let's hit expand entire field. There we go. Because I was expanding from something that couldn't be expanded, it was wondering, what do you want to expand this by? But when I chose year, which had the expand button on it, then in expand or collapse, when I say expand the entire field, it expands into everything I have currently selected here in the rows. And so that's one way. If you were wondering, wait, how do I just get the actual date? There's a couple different ways that I go about that. Number one, when I choose admission date or date of admission, and it makes that automatic choice, if you just hit Control Z, the first thing it will do is remove that automatic choice. Control Z is the shortcut for undo. So that's one of your options. Additionally, if you were to choose date of admission and then right click and choose group, like I had shown you how to choose, just month and year, you could come and pick just the days. There we go. All right, so now we've got those couple of ways of getting to admissions by month, and let's look at the next thing I give as an example. Go ahead and count the patients by blood type. So just another use case example of what's in our data, who's in our data. And so we already have that count of names, and we're just going to choose another field. Another example of this flexibility. I can quickly jump to another type of question in that same table with just a couple of choices. All right, you've just completed 4 quick queries of data, analysis of data, questions of data, with a new capability in Excel. That's fantastic. So let's move on and continue to look at some of the other options that are available from pivot tables. The first thing here is going to be layout and formatting. Number one, I've shown you how to switch between different aggregations. You can take those figures that you're looking at and look at a sum, a count, an average, min, max. You saw all the options that were there. So that's the first thing I'll ask you to do. Go ahead and sum something like total billed amount and then switch it. Take a little practice and do something I've already shown you, but let me show you one more time. I'm going to get rid of everything that's in there. I've got nothing in the pivot table now. I want that billed amount as the value, and let's go ahead and do it by the admission type. Now we've got a sum of billed amount by admission type. But I showed you, if you choose the caret here next to sum of billed amount, you can go to the value field settings and switch that to an average. Get a little extra practice, get that stuck in your brain, how to make that change in pivot tables. Then, the second thing I'll ask you to do, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and try some of the styling, some of the things that are available in making your pivot table present a little bit better, be a little bit cleaner. Now we've got the average build amount by admission type. Let's get this looking really nice. Up above in the design tab that's now available when you're clicked onto the pivot table, you'll notice when you're clicked off of the table, it is not available, but when you're clicked onto it, design pops up as one of the tabs in the ribbon. Right here you can see a number of pivot table styles. Now the style that we've got in front of us is fine for a small table with not a lot of information. However, especially as you get to bigger tables, longer pieces of information, it can be really helpful to have banded rows, or rows that switch back and forth between light and dark in order to show movement and change. So all of these here are doing that, and you can kind of tell because there's an option here to do so. It is not, it wasn't selected. I'm a little surprised, but this just gives me an opportunity to show you how to select it. Up here in the pivot table styles options, banded rows is one of those options. Because I've only got 3 things, it's not making any choice to band these immediately. If I were to pick a bigger category like doctor, yeah, it's still not banding. That's kind of an odd behavior that I didn't expect from this. I'm not exactly sure why that's happening. Here we go with a style that has banded rows that's operating as I expected. So the previous style I picked must not have actually been a style that does banded rows. So that's an example of what those banded rows look like. It helps make a table just more visually, like available to jump around in the table, so that you can just navigate it. That's the word I was looking for. Visually navigatable, so that you can see the difference between records. Alright, so that's a little bit of style and formatting. And the last thing I want to show is one last option that you have in presenting the aggregations that you choose to look at in pivot tables. Now, we showed you how to switch from a sum to an average, and now let's go ahead and look at one other way. Let's get out of doctors and come back to by admission type. Right now we've got that average of build amount. I do want to go back to the sum of build amount, but I want to show you that you can actually do something even different here, which is in the tab right next to summarize values by, there's a show values as. In the show values as option right now is no calculation, but you can do the show values as a percentage of grand total, percentage of column, percentage of row, percentage of parent row, all sorts of options. And so the way that this would look and what it would help accomplish is something like this. It looks like urgent patient admissions account for 32% of our total build amount, where elective admissions account for only 30% of our total build amount. Emergency is at the highest at 36% of our total build amount. So just a little more flexibility you have in quantifying and what to quantify in a pivot table. Alright, that's the last task for learners on that one, and so let's go over to our next item, which is pivot charts. Alright, that same flexibility that's so great for pivoting between questions you have of data actually has a utility to take whatever those choices are and put them into a chart. Sorry, I accidentally jumped back there by choosing that. Alright, so we're just going to look at the basics to get started here by creating a pivot chart, adding a pivot table from that, and then I'm going to ask you to do a couple different types of charts so that you get some practice. So it starts still from creating a pivot table. You can do it in a slightly more direct way, so I'll show you both. Here, let's assume that we've got the table that we sort of want. I do have a specific ask for you, so let's look at what I had there. Create a pivot table summarizing the build amount by admission type. Hey, we sort of already have that. And then insert a column chart to visualize that. So we're going to take this result. I no longer want it to be the percent of total, which I had changed it to. I'm going to say no calculation, just summarize by the sum of build amount. And now I want to turn that into a pivot table. So the way that I do that is up here in the pivot table analyze area, and then you'll see that pivot chart is one of the options over here in the tools section of the ribbon. Now it's going to show me the different types of charts that are available, and it even gives me kind of a preview of what that's going to look like if I were to choose it. I asked you to do a column chart, and so it's already chosen that as well. It sees that as a good first option for this data, so I will hit OK. So there you've just produced a chart from this graph, or from this table that you have on the left, and you've got the sum of build amount graphed in a bar chart, column chart, right next to it. So it's that easy. It is to choose that pivot table, go to pivot table analyze and pivot chart. The direct way that you can do that if you're starting from the data is as you are clicked on the table somewhere, in insert, instead of doing insert pivot table, over here one of the other options is to insert a pivot chart. So two ways to get at the same endpoint, which is to get a chart from a pivot table. All right, so what do I ask you to try next? I want you to try and customize this chart so you can see that you can turn this chart into a simple, clean visual that could be used in a presentation or taken and used to communicate one of your points. So the couple of things I'll add, we're going to change this to not looking at the total by admission type, but let's look at it by department. And then let's add a title that helps say that's what we're doing, and maybe apply a color scheme that matches to our table style. So we'll head back over, try to get those things done. First, we no longer want to look at admission type. I want to go to the department. I actually don't have department in this data set. I'm sorry. That was a presumption I had that was incorrect. So let's go ahead and stick with admission type. It operates in the exact same way. If I had chosen department, I would just have a different way to slice this data. First thing you'll notice is that the title on this chart is really not helpful. It says total. And any chart should have a title that is descriptive, that tells you what is actually in the chart. And so we want to put something like the sum of build amount by admission type. Very descriptive. There's no gray area left. You can tell what is being displayed here. All right, next let's see what are our formatting options, because we want this just to look a little bit cleaner and maybe like what is on the left. We could do something kind of an automatic choice here by looking at, are there any of these options that help to make it clean and a good fit to what we have in our table? I don't see any. The primary thing we probably want to do is go ahead and get these bars to be a different color. So let's look at how that happens. When you're in a chart, you see two different options. One is chart elements and the other is chart style. If you choose chart style, it's going to pop up a whole bunch of different ways that the chart could be quickly morphed, or the other tab here is colors. So you may choose to come down here to another set of colors that is a closer match to the table of information that you have over here on the left. I really actually kind of like that blue, but just to be consistent, I've gone and changed it to a grayscale. That's a better match to the table that we've got it right by. So there you go. You've created a chart. You've got it matching to your table. You've got a nice descriptive title on the top. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do just in this first part of customizing a chart. Now the last item we'll do with the pivot chart is to change it to a different type. We've got it right now as a bar chart, but that might not be the best fit for what we're sharing. And so let's just see how would we change it if we wanted it to be a different chart type. Now that is available up above in the pivot chart analyze section. I'm sorry, not in the pivot chart analyze section. It is in the design tab of our ribbon. And to the very far right in type, there's a button here for change chart type. When you click that, you're going to see the dialog box that came up initially asking you what type of chart might you want to do. I've asked you to go ahead and experiment with what this pie chart look like for this data. So we make that choice, click OK, and you're looking at the same thing. Let me just quickly show you one other element that might be kind of helpful. You might be wondering just quickly, how do I add labels? I want the values to be here. In this pie chart, I've got no scale, and so I can't really tell what the value of each of those slices is. That is available in the chart element button, which is in the top right, by selecting data labels. There you go. So you've transitioned to a different chart type, you've added a label, you've got a great title across the top of it, and you now have some experience with pivot charts. All right, thanks for joining me for this video 7, the introduction to pivot tables. Next, we're doing advanced pivot tables. Can't wait to see it in the next video.